Bob McNally, President of Rapidan Energy. Welcome to the National. OPEC, the V8, have added a jumbo amount of oil back onto the market. It's the fourth jumbo add in a row. Bob, is this a sign of confidence in demand or a cry of crisis to hold on to market share?
Great to be with you, Manus. No question it's a sign of confidence. OPEC plus V8 are putting their barrels where their forecast is. And they have a robust view of demand growth, Manus. They are not worried about tariffs or macroeconomic unrest. Their OPEC secretariat, the barrel counters there, they have a 1.3 million barrels a day on demand growth. Most of the rest of us are at or below 1 million barrels a day. They're also a little more pessimistic about how many more barrels we'll squeeze out of Argentina and Brazil and Canada and Guyana and the US. So when you look at their balances, they said, look folks, nothing to worry about here. We have the opportunity to bring back those barrels faster without tanking the market. And Manus, so far, they've been right. If we look out the window, the oil market is tight. Cushing is empty. Diesel inventories in the United States, very low.
Well, what is the, I mean, if that is the setup for the market, Bob, is that why we're not in the 50s?
That's exactly right. So far, we had a panic moment earlier this year when President Trump announced his Liberation Day tariffs, and we sold off. But then, of course, geopolitical risk cropped up briefly, put a spike into prices. But we're still here in the high 60s because so far, if you look out the window and you look at visible inventory data, look at the curves, Brent oil, backwardated in the front of the curve. There's no sign of a deterioration in fundamentals which would warrant $50 oil yet.
Do you think OPEC Plus have thrown in the towel on prudence?
Absolutely not. They are putting their barrels again where their forecast is. They're saying the market is wrong, the consensus is wrong. We're right. We have customers all over the world. We see the flows. We see the demand, and they're just asserting, not just at the end of the decade, where I agree with them, demand's not going to peak, but even at the end of this year, demand's not going to fall off of a cliff. That's their view, and so far, they've been right.
When we talk about the second half of the year, these extra barrels are going to arrive. The risk is that you have a slowdown. What is the biggest risk in the second half of the year?
The biggest risk is that macro deterioration that we have been fearing. No question, demand for oil started off in the first quarter strong, 1.1 million barrels a day, but it hit the skids and slowed down in the second quarter, especially in China. Almost no demand growth. The question is, a one-time blip, or will China recover? A lot of that depends, I think, on these trade talks, on this uncertainty with regard to interest rates and so forth. That is the big question. Will demand hang in there above a million barrels a day in the second half, as OPEC thinks, or will it decelerate? And if it does, then we're going to see inventories build in the front of the curve roll into contango, and probably see that weakness in prices. So it's just a bet on the future here.
You've worked in the White House, you've worked with a number of administrations. How do you see this Trump administration's attitude, policy towards Russia and Iran at the moment?
So the overall Trump priority is low oil prices. Let me just state that. Everything, Venezuela, Iran, Russia, is seen through that prism. He needs to lower oil prices partly to pressure Iran and Russia, but also to convince Jay Powell to lower those interest rates. So that's the foundation of the view. Now, with regard to Iran, for the time being, after the war, President Trump wants a deal. You know, Manus, he's probably the only president who could have ordered a preemptive strike, as he did, against Iran's nuclear system, but he's also the only president who would do a deal with this regime if he can get it. And so for that reason, he's backing off on this maximum pressure. He's not strictly enforcing the sanctions that he criticized Biden for not enforcing. So Iran's exports are doing very well. China's a happy camper. They're getting discounted oil, they're paying for it in RMB, and they're loving it. And so far, Trump's allowing that to give Iran some deal space to say, look, don't do it, don't reach for the bomb, come back into talks, let's get into a peace dynamic.
Let's close with this. We hear this 333 from Scott Besson, 3 million barrels or the equivalent thereof of oil and gas. How much control does this White House have really, Bob, in terms of driving production in the US? The frackers are down at the moment. What's the difference between the policy voice and the reality?
You know, in the short term, my experience is any president has very little ability to make oil and gas production go up in the near term. Those decisions are made by investment decisions that were made long time ago. So what a president can do, though, is make prices go down, and that is by making macroeconomic errors. I'm not saying the president is. I'm not a macroeconomist, but the big risk is that he gets that $50 oil or lower, mainly because of macroeconomic policies, and that would lower production.
Bob McNally, thank you for joining us at The National.
Thank you, Manus.